I'd like to tell you a story about failure. Well, two failures. I would like to tell you a story about a failure long ago, and a failure much more recent. A story about joy, sorrow, health, disease, timings great and poor. A story about stories, about human history and myth. A story about a parking lot, and the hunt for the truth buried underneath it. In 1923, brothers Henry, Hillel, and Herman Hassenfield immigrated to the United States from Poland. They found themselves in Providence, Rhode Island, a city in the midst of a manufacturing boom. It was the perfect place for the brothers to put down roots and chase the American dream. Though they were initially in the business of textiles, they would soon transition into a new market: toys. Finding their first major success with the world-famous Mr. Potato Head, Hassenfield Brothers Incorporated was at the forefront of a toy industry exponentially growing in the post-war boom. On the other side of the country, the Walt Disney Production Company would release The Absent-Minded Professor in 1961, a sci-fi comedy about a chemistry professor who discovers a rubbery substance that defies the laws of physics, which he uses to cheat at sporting events and some other things. The film was a massive success for Disney, grossing over $25 million at the box office and receiving favorable critical reviews. Disney would soon begin developing their first ever sequel film, Son of Flubber, and among the first to take notice would be Hassenfield Brothers, who would begin licensing Disney properties for merchandising in 1954, and saw an opportunity to create a lucrative tie-in product. Working with Disney, they would follow in the professor's footsteps and create their very own Flubber. Hassenfield's Flubber was a stretchy, bouncy synthetic rubber that first hit store shelves in late 1962, just a few months before the new film would reach theaters. Much like Silly Putty, which hit the market a decade prior, Flubber could float on water, be molded into shapes, and flow into containers. The toy was an instant success, breaking 4 million units sold in just a few months, and seen in newspapers and in radio and TV advertising across the country. Hassenfield had a hit on their hands. Mission accomplished. Then kids started getting sick. Reports flew in. Playing with Flubber could cause contact dermatitis, or facial rashes, or bumps around the hair rash all over the blisters, around the mouth, or facial rash, or full body dermatitis. It made people sick. The FDA tested Flubber, but could not find a link. Unfortunately, the damage was done. The company issued a voluntary recall on May 1st, after only months on the market, and instructed sellers to ship their Flubber back to the factory. But what to do with it all?
Glad you could make it. I hope that little voiceover intro didn't give you any trouble. I've called this meeting today because I've been searching for something that's been lodged in my brain since I was a little kid, like a truth tumor. A story that Trumor. I should have said Trumor. A story that seemed too good to be true.
They tried sending the Flubber to a landfill, but local kids kept breaking in to steal it, and they were forced to take it back. They tried burning it, but it let off a noxious black smoke, meaning that no new pope had been selected. They even tried dumping it into the ocean, forgetting that they had so relentlessly marketed Flubber's ability to float. Taking inspiration from the famed Atari burial that would occur 20 years later, the ultimate decision was to take their pile of damp, lightly toasted garbage goo and stick it in a hole. They then paved a new parking lot over it, where it currently stands at 60 Delta Drive in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and where on hot summer days, one could find Flubber oozing through the cracks in the pavement.
That was a great story. But how true is it?
So let's get our facts straight. Flubber definitely was sold and advertised in early 1963, and it definitely was the epicenter of a health scare that led to several lawsuits across the country as well as an eventual recall. We even have a contemporary source confirming that stores shipped their stock back to the manufacturer. But let's trace the burial myth back as far as we can go. The first appearance I spotted is in the 1990 book Toyland, where the authors cite original research as well as several other books consulted. Of the mentioned books that I could track down, none of them discussed Flubber. Another book, G. Wayne Miller's 1998 Toy Wars, makes mention of the Flubber rumor wholesale, and more interestingly, he donated his interview tapes to the library at the University of Rhode Island. So let's take a trip to the Special Archives. Look how much I do for you guys, and let's see what we can find.
What happened to all that? There's a rumor, not a rumor, the myth is it was buried.
Not a myth, it's buried on the Delta Drive.
It is. Yeah. That's a bubble up ever. Right?
That's the myth that sometimes it bubbles up in the building. I mean, it's buried on the Delta Drive.
How much of it?
I don't know.
There we go. Alfred Verrecchia, the CEO of Hasbro at the time, confirming the story. Smoking gun. Or is it? Here's a local news article from a few years ago that investigated the same story, and here's a quote from the same guy claiming he was just repeating the myth. And hey, this article did my work for me. It goes on to claim that there were no records of Flubber being incinerated or dumped in the ocean as well. But maybe the dumping and burning grew onto the story later. Let's keep going. Surely, if there is Flubber under that lot, there would be records of that, right? Well, in 1997, the company sold the building that the lot was attached to. Hasbro claimed at the time that there was no Flubber under this lot, as it would have needed to be disclosed as a hazardous material by the Department of Environmental Management. But would it? Let's take a step back and talk about the health scare. Did Flubber make kids sick? It is stated that 40% of the children who played with Flubber in Kansas City, where the largest lawsuit was filed, got rashes. And yet, of the 4+ million units sold, the FDA claimed to only receive a total of around 1,600 reports of illness across the country, and the actual nature of the rash differs in every local paper I looked at. It would seem to me that Flubber was innocent. Maybe it made a good environment for viruses to survive on. Maybe it picked up dirt. Or maybe a popular toy came out at the same time as a rash was going around Kansas City, and once the story hit the news, confirmation bias spread around the country like a rash through Kansas City. So when the FDA tested Flubber, there would be nothing to declare hazardous because the toy was safe, and thus, when the building was sold, there would be no need to declare any hazardous materials. I leave you with one more anecdote. An anonymous source in a 1997 edition of the Jerusalem Post claiming to be the man responsible for disposing of the unsold Flubber. So he claims he tried incinerating the Flubber at the factory itself, and that he dumped it into the ocean without proper approval. No paper trail in either case. And finally, most interestingly, he claims to have convinced the contractors renovating Delta Drive at the time to let him build the parking lot, so he could get rid of his Flubber problem once and for all.
Do I believe this story? Well, it is interesting. Perhaps having moved out of the country and given it 40 years, seeing the news of the Flubber remake in 1997 could have inspired him to finally share his story. But as long as the lot's still there, we're never going to know. Every time I find a source that debunks part of this myth, I find another source that gives it a viable out. My search for truth seems to have only led to unsatisfying conclusions. Hasbro, as we all know, would bounce back from this failure, releasing G.I. Joe the very next year, and today have become such a big company that's something interesting to say here. But as for the lot itself, there's only one way that story ends. And here we are, the Flubber lot, all those years later. Today it is owned by the Vivacity company, I believe, and the lot itself badly needs to be repaid, but I can confirm it is a hot day, and no Flubber has been bubbling up. So why did we go all the way out here? I don't know. I think the moral of the story this week is don't investigate urban legends from the 60s that are extremely poorly documented. I guess we'll never know if there's Flubber under this lot. It bested me. I looked for the truth and I found nothing. So, with that in mind, I consider this a failure, and I regret all of the time I've invested into working on it. So, you win this round, Flubber lot. Let's go home.